Hey there, how's it going today? Do you have a sourdough starter that is driving you crazy but because you have to maintain it every day? I did for a while too. So I made my own sourdough starter and I got so tired of having to feed it every day. And I decided I was going to try something different that I'm going to show you today. I'm also going to show you two variations of my sourdough that I make that I feel like is really easy, and I hope you do too. So let's get started. We're going to grab my sourdough starter from the fridge. So to start out our bread, we're going to take some of this sourdough starter that is in the fridge. And as you can see, it's kind of just sitting in there, hanging out. Okay? It is not liquidy like the other things that I've seen. I'm going to use a rubber spatula. I use either a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon to mix up my sourdough. So I'm going to just take out some of this sourdough starter to put in to start our bread. So I don't measure this part. I just put in a glob of it, however much I feel like. A small amount will do, a larger amount does just fine as well. I could actually leave this in there and use this again for another day if I wanted to, or I can mix up and feed this today. So I think I'm going to do that today so then I can show you what that looks like and how I maintain it. To start out, I'm going to put this aside and I'll show you how we do that here in a second. I do a 1-to-2 ratio of water, the liquid, to dry the flour. So it's going to be a dry sourdough starter. That's what's the beauty of this. There isn't feeding it every day. It kind of just lives in your fridge for a while. And then when you're ready to make some sourdough, you can pull it out, you take it out, mix it up, and you get started with it. So here I'm going to take whatever's left in my jar, and I'm going to put in a half a cup of water. So I have a half a cup, that means I'm going to use 1 cup of flour for this. I'm actually going to warm this up just a bit so that it's not cold. Since this came from the fridge, it's cold, and having a little bit of warm water will help activate the little microbes in there to get them going. So now I have some warm water. I'm going to pour it in. I like to do the water into the sourdough starter to help just loosen everything up before I start adding in the flour. I'm going to kind of try to scrape down all of the bits that are on the side as much as I can, but I'm not going to be too particular about this. And then I'm just going to stir this up till it gets kind of like all the sourdough starter gets sort of mixed in. It doesn't have to be perfect though. We're not here to be perfect. So remember, we have half a cup in here, so I need a cup of my flour. Now this is where I could be a little bit different. It may not always be exactly like 1-to-1. So I like to do this, make a mess, put this in, and oh my gosh, I'm making a huge mess. That's okay. We're going to use that flour anyway. And then see how it goes. So right now, I can tell that it's probably going to need a little bit more flour, because what I want it to be is kind of like a dough. I don't want it to be liquidy at all. I want it to be a dough in here. So I'm going to just scrape all this down and out a little bit. it on the counter and I'm going to actually knead it like a dough. And then I'm going to actually add a little bit more flour because this was a bit more liquidy than I would like. So that's the thing here, is you just kind of have to play around with it just a bit on your own. I don't normally actually add a whole half a cup and a cup. I normally do a fourth of a cup and a half a cup of flour. So a fourth cup of water and half a cup of flour, just because I don't really need a whole lot of starter. All right, so I'm gonna just try to get all of this out of here and be a mess. That's okay. We're messy people, it's okay. I'm gonna try to scrape as much of this as I can. If there's still some, it doesn't matter because it's gonna just live in there anyway. I just take this and just kind of knead it on the counter. I'm gonna add a little bit more flour. What I'm looking for is like a bread dough consistency with my starter. That's the whole thing. It becomes a dry starter. Rather than having to feed it every single day, it kind of just lives off of what is in here right now. So it slows it down a bit. It doesn't have as much of the activation as you see with the sourdough, like the more liquidy sourdough starters. It doesn't have that much oomph, right? It doesn't puff up quite as much in the jar while you're waiting for it. It's not going to overflow, maybe. I don't know. I've put a lot in here, so we'll see. So now I've kind of given it some love. Okay, see, and you can tell that it is sort of like a sticky dough. It makes a nice little ball. We put this back in here. Beep, beep. Go in there. Okay, and that's gonna just sit on the counter. I like to just leave the lid sort of loosely on, and I'm just gonna set it over here on the counter to sit for at least 8 hours. It should hopefully rise up. So it will rise up to here. Once it's done that, it goes back in the fridge, hangs out there, lives there till I'm ready to use it. I've left this sitting in the fridge for like a month before, and it was perfectly fine. Like it doesn't have to be messed with or anything on a daily basis. You can just leave it in your fridge. That's the beauty of this, is you just leave it in your fridge and it hangs out. And whenever you're ready to use it, you just take out a little bit like we did earlier, right? Use your recipe that you want to use, and then you just put it back in and it'll hang out there until you're ready to use it again. And again, once you get down to like just that little bit of, I'm gonna throw that in there, a little bit of like starter down, like it could just be the little scraps that are on the jar. That's okay too. You just take your water, kind of scrape down all of the bits that you can, and it'll keep going. You don't really need a whole lot of starter in order to keep it going. This is my lazy way to maintain my sourdough starter. So it's gonna go on the counter. I'll show you what it looks like later on when it's risen. Now, let's finish up our actual bread. Okay, so for the bread, this is a recipe that I found from actually another YouTuber, and I love it so much because it's really easy to just do. You don't have to do a lot of hands-on things with it. And two, it's sort of like a yeast bread dough rather than a sourdough, as far as what you do to like knead it. So you actually knead this dough, and then you can just pop it in the oven basically after it rises. So we're gonna start with I just have a chunk of my sourdough starter. I'm going to get another half a cup of water. Okay, so I have a half a cup of warmed up water. I only do it like 30 seconds in the microwave. So again, I'm doing the sourdough starter with water first and just trying to loosen up that sourdough starter so that it's not just one big clump in there. I feel like it just mixes up better that way. Okay, and then I'm adding in a 2/3 cup-ish, close enough, 2/3 cup of flour. So this is called the pre-ferment. So it's what's kind of like this sourdough starter that you might pull out from your fridge if you have a like a liquid, more wet starter. Okay, this I would say, but I feel like even in regular sourdough bread, you still have to do a pre-ferment. I feel like this isn't regular sourdough bread, but it's really easy. So this just is going to ferment for about 8 hours. It can go 12 to 24 hours, I think, as well, if you wanted to let it go that long, or if you forget about it, or if you ran out of time to do it. It can go, I think, about 24 hours. It does tend to get really bubbly and kind of loses some of its oomph a little bit. So I like to just let it go for about 8 to 10 hours, depending on what my day was like. So we're in the morning right now. So I'm starting this in the morning. I'm gonna let it sit until the evening, and then I'm gonna mix up the next part. So you'll see that next. What I like to do, what I've been doing lately, is I have this big like bread bag, because I still buy bread. I don't make sourdough all the time. This is like from Costco. They have the double loaves in here, but it works perfectly as my little bag to maintain my stuff. So a little tip if you need one. You can also just get some other kind of plastic bag or saran wrap. I just don't buy saran wrap, so I kind of am using what I have. So this is gonna sit, and we'll come back and check on it in about 8 hours. So we'll see you then. Okay, so we're back after about 8 hours or so, and we're ready to mix up our bread. So I'm going to take out my pre-ferment, and it's nice and bubbly. And to this, I'm going to add 3/4 cup of milk, a tablespoon of honey. I'm not going to really measure this out. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Good enough. A tablespoon of butter. And again, maybe close enough. A teaspoon of salt. And then I'm going to warm all this up so that the butter gets nice and melted and the honey kind of liquefies a little bit more. And so then it can mix well with my pre-ferment. Okay, so now my butter and everything's kind of melted together. I'm going to give it a little stir to try to dissolve the salt a little bit more. And then I'm pouring this in. And I'm going to mix this all up. Remember, mixing the wet first with your sourdough, I think helps, at least for me. I think it helps to mix it first and just kind of help loosen up your starter and everything. And now, here's sort of the lazy part, I guess. I mean, semi-lazy part. So we're gonna mix in our flour. So we have 2 and either 1/4 of a cup or just 2 cups, depends on how it goes. That was 1 cup. I'm gonna mix it up. Maybe 1 more cup. And then, like I said earlier, we are going to knead this just like regular yeast dough. If you've ever made dough before, like any kind of bread or anything before, you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to knead the dough. I'm just gonna mix it up a little bit and then I'm gonna start kneading. Actually, I don't know why I threw that back in. It doesn't have to be perfect. In a typical sourdough, I think you go every like 15 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that to flip the dough and I don't know, do all the things. And I feel like that's so much work, so much extra things that I don't need to do. But I do love dough, so I do like to do this part, which this to me is really relaxing. So I'm going to knead the dough. I put in 2 cups, so I'm gonna just kind of watch and see if I need more or if this is good. And I just spend a couple minutes kneading the dough. It's actually looking like it's pretty good, almost. It's not too sticky. And one of my great aunts, the trick that she taught me to test out dough is like if you push your finger on it and it doesn't stick to it and it just kind of bounces back a little bit, that usually means it's pretty good. So I think this dough has actually come together pretty well already. See, that took barely any time at all. So what we're going to do, take this, actually I'm going to clean out this bowl one moment. Okay, back with the clean bowl. So I'm just going to take my dough, stick it in my bowl, and then I'm going to stick it right back into my bag I had earlier and let it sit overnight now. And then in the morning we'll do the final step. So being lazy does not necessarily mean it doesn't take time, but each of our steps only took maybe 5 minutes so far. The longest time is actually going to be the baking time, really. But I don't have to go back and check on this dough at all. It just can sit here overnight and I don't have to mess with it until the morning when I'm ready to actually bake my bread. This is why we're doing lazy sourdough. Oh, crap. Oops. So this morning I'm going to show you how to mold this dough and get it ready to bake. I forgot to film the second half of the first batch of dough, so this is actually a new batch of dough, and this is actually a double recipe because I would like to have some bread here and I'm baking a loaf for our church picnic. So this bread has been sitting out on the counter all night. It's pretty fluffy. Hopefully it'll have enough to give for later too still. I'm going to show you 2 ways. Now, I like to just do a loaf pan for mine, but I am going to show you how to make it a little more fancy as well. I am not an expert on sourdough at all, but I do enjoy baking bread, so I've been making my sourdough bread for a while. I don't do it very often, but when I do like to make it in a loaf pan, and I just take some butter and I kind of just rub the butter around to grease up the loaf pan. I find my kids tend to actually eat the bread that I make in a loaf pan rather than sort of just a round loaf, which I'm going to show you how to do that as well. The second thing that I'm going to show you is I'm going to make it into sort of just your standard like loaf that I don't know, you think of when you get a sourdough loaf. I guess I'm going to use a tea towel to line this bowl. I don't have any kind of fancy equipment for this. So I just take my tea towel and put it inside the bowl, and then I'm going to just sprinkle flour onto my tea towel. And I'm kind of just like sort of rubbing it in so that it gets in between the fibers of the tea towel a little bit, so that the dough doesn't stick into the fibers of the tea towel. I have like an old towel, I think, that my grandmother used to use, but I hadn't used it before. Okay, so now we're going to shape these loaves, and I'm actually going to show you one of my favorite sort of alternative recipe. I just like to add in stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually sprinkle the counter. So I'm going to sprinkle the counter a little bit so that I can cut up this loaf. I don't want too much extra flour. But I don't want to work this too much more, but I am just going to try to kind of fold it onto itself, just so that we keep all that nice bubbly goodness going in there. Okay. And that is going to go into my tea towel that I prepared a while ago. That's just going to plop down. Okay, so I just stuck it in there. I actually stuck it seam side down, but that's okay. You really probably should put it seam side up. There's some extra flour, so I'm just kind of rubbing it on the outside just to keep it, again, from sticking. And I'm going to just fold this over. And that's just going to, actually I don't want to fold it over that much, because then if it rises up, it's going to get all stuck. So I'm just going to try to keep it gently folded over. Let's just do it like that. And then we'll check on that in an hour or so. This is my other recipe that I tend to like to make for my kids for breakfast. So I'm going to try to gently get the rest of this out. Okay. So what I like to do is I take this and I just kind of stretch it out. I'm not, again, trying to work it too much right now. Okay. Then, hold on, I have to go get this up for it. Be right back. Okay, I forgot to grab the things that I needed. So what I make is like it's basically like a cinnamon roll without actually being all of the cinnamon roll kind of stuff going on. So what I do is I just take some brown sugar and I just sprinkle it on. And I don't really measure this part either. I just kind of do it however I feel. So I just sprinkle some brown sugar. That's probably good for this part. Then I'm going to sprinkle on some cinnamon. Okay, then I'm going to roll this sort of up a little bit. I'm not done yet though. So I'm going to do it again. So I'm rolling it up, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to press it out a little bit more. So instead of just having one like swirl, like you might get from, I feel like they have like the cinnamon swirled bread. We've had that before. But I feel like if you do one layer and then you swirl it again, you get a nice even sort of coating and flavoring of the cinnamon and sugar in there. So then I just kind of flatten it out again and add some more brown sugar. Sprinkle it with some more cinnamon. I love cinnamon, so I tend to over sprinkle with the cinnamon. You don't have to put this much cinnamon. I just like cinnamon. Okay, now this is where you're going to actually like roll it and you'll get a nice little spiral in your loaf. And then we're gonna just kind of pinch the edges together. It doesn't have to be like perfectly sealed or anything, it's fine. Just so it doesn't come completely undone. And now we're gonna take that and put it in here. I just kind of like to sort of press it up a little bit, just so it kind of evens out into my loaf pan. And I'm gonna let this rise a little bit more before we bake. So I think in the recipe I use, it says to let it rise for 2 to 3 hours. I don't tend to do that. I don't have time for that a lot of times. So if I do have time, I will. But I think an hour, as long as I haven't pushed down on my dough too much, it tends to have enough like rise already so that I only have to let it rise for about an hour. So we'll come back and check on this in a little bit. I'm going to clean up and I'll show you how I bake them. Okay, so it's been about an hour now and my loaf bread one is ready to go. It looks much puffier than it was. I'm not going to like score this or anything. I'm just going to pop it in the oven. It might bust on its own, but I don't care because this is for us to just munch on. However, I am going to try to carefully put this onto my little transfer thing. It's a little silicone thing for making sourdough. I bought this a long time ago and I think I've only used it maybe once or twice because I ended up switching over to just using the loaf pan, so I really didn't use this very much. So I'm gonna like just kind of get it on there. See, there's lots of flour. Actually, I'm gonna turn this over because this, remember, I put it in the wrong way. Oopsies. So I'm gonna actually flip it over. Try to carefully flip it over so that my seam is on the bottom. I'm just using a razor blade I'm gonna just put a little slice in this. I'm not doing anything too fancy on this one. I have done flowers and like leaves and stuff, but I'm just going to do a nice little score across my dough. I do like to try to make sure I get it in there pretty good, because you want to be able to let some of the steam out. That's the whole point of scoring it, is so that the steam can escape in a controlled way. If you don't, it just will bust open wherever it wants to. But if you have it scored like this, then the steam will come out and it will look prettier in the end. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. And then I'm going to show you how I'm baking. Okay, for my loaf that not in the loaf pan, loaf, I have put a cast iron Dutch oven in my oven to warm up while the oven was heating up. So it's at 400. So it's been in here for a few minutes. I'm not being particular about it. I'm going to put this in here. And that's supposed to not go down. Forgot that was hot. Damn it, that hurt. Put the lid back on. Freaking hate that. Okay, and I'm also going to put, scoot that over, my loaf pan in here and close that up. I'm gonna bake them. The lid for the Dutch oven is gonna stay on for about 20 minutes. I'm gonna bake them, and then I'm gonna rotate my loaf pan, and then I'm taking off the lid for the Dutch oven. God, it's been about 20 minutes now, and I'm gonna check on my bread. As you can see, my loaf pan one actually did kind of split open on the side because I didn't cut it and score it, so it just busted open wherever it wanted, which is fine, so it doesn't matter. The other one, I'm going to grab another hot pan. Pull this out just a little bit. I'm going to open that up now and let it bake without the lid on so that it can kind of crisp up. It did end up kind of cracking a little bit, but it'll be fine. It's going to be donated and hopefully people will not mind. Alright, so we're going to close that back up. We're going to put it on for about 25 more minutes. The loaf pan I don't think needs to go quite as long as the other one. So I'm going to come back and check on the loaf pan probably in about 15 minutes and see how it's doing, and then go from there and see how it goes. The other one I do think needs to go probably closer to 25 minutes. Okay, so now I have, it's been less than 25 minutes, but I noticed that my bread was pretty much ready. So I'm going to take this out now. Look how gorgeous that looks. So I did want to show you what this bread looks like when it's done. Ooh, it's crunchy. Ooh, it's so soft and fluffy. Ooh, it's steaming. Look, nice little swirl in there. Delicious. And this is my basket that I put together for our church picnic. So I have my bread, I have some strawberry jam that I had made earlier this year. I put in a little jar with the starter going, and one of my extra little mats. And then I'm also going to have a little recipe and a note for how to maintain our starter. And hopefully someone will bid on it. We'll see. I'll let you guys know maybe. I hope you've enjoyed this. Go make some sourdough.